Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by Allstate and the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust.
Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Michael Puente, reporter with WBEZ Chicago. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us on the show tonight. As Indiana's Latino population grows, its representation in the General Assembly hasn't. We sit down with the lone Latino lawmaker representing this community and the issues he is fighting for. You've probably heard of food deserts, but what impacts are pharmacy deserts having on the health of Chicagoans on the south and west sides? Vendors say their fate at the discount mall in Little Village is still unknown. We speak with business owners waiting for answers.
And it just dawned on me, like, it's filled with so much love from me to whomever is going to receive this.
And meet the local woman who fills purses with essentials and words of encouragement for women in need. First off tonight, Latinos in the state of Indiana represent 8% of the population. That's according to the Indiana Latino Institute. Their findings show that undocumented immigrants contribute nearly $100 million to the state's economy. Yet, when it comes to their representation in the General Assembly, the state has only a single Latino representative. Joining us now to talk about Latino representation, abortion, and other issues affecting the Latino community in Indiana is State Representative Mike Andrade. His district includes Munster, Highland, South Hammond, and North Griffith. Thank you for joining us, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Puente. It's an honor to be here with you today.
Thank you. As we just heard, you are the only Hispanic lawmaker in Indiana's General Assembly. How do you think lawmakers like yourself can promote more participation in politics among the Latino community?
I believe that we strongly can make a difference when we work together. So I've been heavily involved in my community, especially in the Hispanic community, bringing different stakeholders together. And we are strong in numbers. And so I've been working feverishly to have, education be a priority, healthcare, as we all saw what happened last week with the abortion bill, and other topics that affect our Hispanic community by bringing stakeholders together and promoting that being a public servant and being a Latino in office is a good thing because representation matters.
That's right. That's right. And you brought up the abortion vote from last week. We have a clip of you talking on the State House floor. Let's take a listen to that.
I believe in a woman's right to have the freedom to make her own decisions. A woman's choice should not be decided by the government, but rather by her doctor, family, and faith, and most importantly, herself. I do not possess the knowledge or the ability or the expertise to make a decision on behalf of 3.4 million women in our Hoosier state. But I will tell you this, I will continue to fight for women's rights and all Hoosiers because that's what they deserve.
Now that they actually voted to approve that the new abortion restrictions, and how do you think that affects overall Indiana and the Latino community?
Well, it's strongly going to affect all of us because, as I mentioned, we all have women in our lives that we love, whether it's our spouses, our mothers, teachers, nurses, our neighbors, nieces. And so healthcare is already a big priority in our state, especially in our Black and brown communities. In our Hispanic communities, we lack having access to healthcare. And so this is going to put more restrictions on our communities, especially in the Black and brown communities. Instead of us working forward, we're working backwards. And that's something that I'm going to continue to work with my colleagues downstate to make sure that this next session coming up, that we are making provisions, modifications on that bill to be able to make it more accessible for women to have the right to health care. And that's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for women to have the ability to make their own decisions, but most importantly, to have access to health care.
Well, Representative, being the only Latino in the State House, is it difficult for you to not only represent your entire community, but you're almost like the lone voice for Latinos in the State House? Tell us about how difficult that can be for you.
It's challenging. It's challenging because I'm the only person walking into a room a lot of times, and I'm the only Latino. But you know what? It's also an honor, Mr. Puente. I remember when I got elected in 2020, and I went to the State House with my dad, and I get emotional. My dad came as an immigrant to this country from Mexico. And I remember him working 3 jobs sometimes so that he could be able to afford for us to have a meal in the table. Not only that, but for him to be able to pay the attorneys, immigration attorneys, so he could get his legal status. So people forget how much our immigrant families come here to work. Not only do they come here to give us a better lifestyle and themselves, but also to be able to afford paying for immigration attorneys, which is very expensive nowadays, and even back then. And we're walking into the State House, Mr. Puente, and my dad looked at me, and he says, son, we did it. You did it. We have arrived. And I will always remember those words. And that's why it's an honor to be the only Latino, 100% Hispanic Latino in the State House, fighting every day for our Latino communities, because it truly is an honor. We have arrived. There is representation. The worst part about it will be if there was zero representation. That will be the most difficult part. And I know it's challenging, but we're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to advocate, and that is an honor to serve our Latino communities, because sí se puede. I truly believe in ese refrán que dice, sí se puede. Un pueblo unido jamás será vencido. And we're going to continue to fight, and we're going to continue to advocate for our community.
Well, Representative, what do you see as the needs for the Latino community, not just in your district, but statewide?
Well, statewide, one of the biggest things that I've been advocating for, and we're going to bring this up again this next session, is for the undocumented, the immigration community, to be able to have access to driver license or an ID to be able to drive. So they could be able to commute from their house to their jobs, to be able to pick up their kids at school, be able to have a quality of life just like every one of us Hoosiers here in our state. So I've been pushing for that, as my neighboring state, Illinois, has already have that for the documented community, where they're able to have a driver license or some type of identification to be able to drive. And as our economic development and our economy grows in our state, the Latino community play a big factor in that, especially right now with the cost of living rising and the retention of employees and employers looking for more workers to work. The Latino community is very strong in our workforce in our state. And so I'm going to be continuing to push for them to be able to have some type of identification, to be able to have access to driving to their jobs, to picking up their kids at school without having to worry about the law coming after that. So that's one of the biggest issues. Number 2 is education. In-state tuition reimbursement is very important for our DACA students and for our students who have already applied for legal citizenship, but the process, as we know on a federal level, takes a long time. So allowing them to be able to get in-state tuition reimbursement just like everybody else is important, because education matters. And we want to make sure that our Latino community are being educated, because they contribute to our economic development and our economic growth in our state. And as we've been talking, healthcare. So those are some of the biggest priorities in our state that I'm pushing for, that I'm looking for next session to continue to have those conversations with my colleagues across the aisle.
Well, Representative, we got less than 30 seconds. How do you effectively communicate your information to Latinos in Indiana and Northwest Indiana?
Being engaged in the community. We're going to be having a roundtable here next Wednesday coming up with Representative or Congressman Tony Cardenas from California and Congressman Frank Marvan. I've been helping to put a Latino roundtable with them so that representation matters, and bringing the Latino community together, especially leaders in the community, so we could advocate and hear their concerns. As you know, this year I had a Latino roundtable downstate with the Lieutenant Governor, and I brought Latino leaders from my community downstate. I brought the Lieutenant Governor to my district to join us to meet in different Hispanic businesses. You were able to join us with Torteria Nuevo León, and she was able to see the manufacturing plant there and see the employees and see how the Latino community contributes to our state. So that's one of the biggest things that I've been doing, is being engaged in the community, hearing their concerns, and bringing to them solutions that we could do to continue working together, improving everyone's quality of life in our state.
Well, our thanks to Indiana State Representative Mike Andrade for joining us here on Latino Voices.
Thank you.
Now to Joanna Hernandez and an update on a controversial redevelopment in Little Village. The mall's contract is up soon, and vendors are hoping the company who bought it lets them stay. Joanna has more.
Michael, it's been 2 years since the discount mall in Little Village was sold to development company Novak Construction. We have been following this story and interviewed dozens of vendors who work at the mall. They tell us the mall's contract expires at the end of the month, and they haven't heard anything about plans to renew the mall's contract and are afraid of being displaced. In the company's last statement, they said they were going to work to understand the neighborhood better. But according to several vendors, they haven't had any communication.
Pienso que eso sí es triste, que no den una respuesta para saber y uno también tratar de, pues tenemos que buscar, la vida tiene que seguir y nosotros tenemos que echarle para adelante. Y si es aquí, mejor.
It's been difficult. A lot of the vendors just aren't willing to speak up. They aren't willing to share because they're afraid of reprisals. They're afraid of reprisals from the current owners of the discount mall, but they're also afraid that if they speak up too much or if they cause too much of a wave, that their booth might be closed.
The vendors say they haven't heard anything from the developer in over a year. And tune into Monday Night Chicago tonight, where I'll share more on what local officials have to say about the matter. But for now, Michael, we send it back to you.
Thanks, Joanna. Up next, Amanda Vinicky with a look at the impact of pharmacy deserts on Chicago's south and west sides. So stay with us.
Don't miss one of our stories. Get them all delivered to your desktop or mobile device with a subscription to the WTTW News Daily Briefing. Go to WTTW.com/dailybriefing and sign up.
You might have heard about food deserts, areas where access to fresh food might not be easily accessible, but pockets of Chicago, particularly on the south and west sides, also lack convenient access to a local pharmacy. Joining us to talk about it are Cheyenne Daniels, a reporter with The Hill and a contributor with the Chicago Sun-Times. Daniels recently published a report with WBEZ on pharmacy deserts, and the researcher credited with coining the term pharmacy desert, Dima Cato, now director of the University of Southern California School of Pharmacy Program on Medicines and Public Health, previously at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Thanks to each of you. And Dima, let's begin with you. You, again, literally coined the term pharmacy desert. We know that, of course, medicines, prescriptions can be life-saving. But outside of the obvious, why are pharmacy deserts so problematic?
Well, pharmacies are vital to communities. They provide access not only to medicines, but a variety of other essential services, including vaccinations. And their kind of critical role in promoting public health in the community became very clear since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Any particular ways that you think this really was amplified during COVID?
In the beginning, pharmacies were key in testing, COVID testing. And later on, for COVID vaccinations, more than 75% of people that got their COVID vaccine got it at a retail pharmacy. And it became problematic when communities had a hard time finding pharmacies, let alone pharmacies that offered the vaccine. And in Chicago, those communities were on the south and west sides. And that, for me, wasn't not really kind of surprising, given that we knew that these communities are pharmacy deserts. And
Cheyenne, you, as well as WBEZ's reporters, did analyze this and really kind of drilled down more into where there are pharmacy deserts within Chicago. Can you summarize those findings?
Yeah, I think that what we saw was, especially based on Professor Cato's research, is that most of these pharmacy deserts are on the south and west side. When we look at places like where Roseland, for instance, is one of those areas that has seen multiple locally owned pharmacies as well as conglomerates close over the past few years. And especially during the civil unrest of 2020, we saw quite a few of those stores close, in part due to lootings that they experienced. And so it's really in predominantly Black and brown neighborhoods that these pharmacies have closed and taken away these services that these residents need.
Now, you touched on there are these big box kind of brand names, the Walgreens really in Chicago as well as CVS, but also a dwindling number of independent pharmacies. So, Dima, why is that, and what role in particular do both insurance companies and government policies play?
So when we talk about chains, so yes, Walgreens is the predominant chain in the city of Chicago. I think that's long been recognized. But independents play a really important role in communities of color, including in the South and West Sides, including in pharmacy deserts. So even though pharmacies are far away, the nearest pharmacy is more likely to be an independent than a chain. And in terms of, government players, particularly in the state of Illinois, Medicaid, they play a huge role, them and, the pharmacy benefit managers that they contract with. And I say that for two reasons. One, pharmacies aren't reimbursed enough, especially pharmacies that we know serve predominantly publicly insured populations and therefore rely on Medicaid reimbursement rates to stay open. And two, Medicaid is also responsible for determining, where their beneficiaries could go to fill their medications. And oftentimes that's a chain. And for some plans like Aetna Medicaid, that chain is not Walgreens. That was discussed in the WBZ Sun-Times story that Cheyenne co-wrote. It's CVS. And we know CVS isn't really conveniently located in these neighborhoods. So what that means is that there are fewer patients entering these independents, these non-preferred pharmacies, and therefore fewer prescriptions filled, less money for the pharmacy, and therefore making it really difficult to stay open.
Hard for them to survive without customers who can shop there for those medicines. Now, at the same time, Cheyenne, while there's certainly, it sounds like, an opportunity for government policy to change to fix this problem, Illinois is also giving pharmacists the opportunity to do more, to give vaccines, and also a new law will allow pharmacists to prescribe hormonal contraception, birth control, without a doctor's prescription. But they can't do that if there isn't a nearby pharmacy to go to, right?
Exactly. And I think one of the real fallouts of that we see is that it really impacts Black and brown women. And we already know that Black women, especially when it comes to maternal health care, maternal mortality rates, infant mortality rates, they have some of the worst health outcomes, if not the worst health outcomes than especially their white counterparts. And so having access to things like hormonal contraception can be a life-saving service at their disposal that they can't access without having these pharmacies in their communities.
Dima, how does Chicago stack up to other cities when it comes to pharmacy deserts?
It's the worst in terms of the difference between Black and brown communities and white neighborhoods. So the disparities. The disparities is just kind of starking, right? With 1% of white neighborhoods in the city of Chicago, we found were pharmacy deserts compared to 42%, almost a half of Black neighborhoods.
And Dima, just
5% of Hispanic neighborhoods.
Dima, briefly, of course, some people do get their medicine online. Why is that not an option, or does that change things at all?
So very few people get all their medicines online. We know that. And it's really not the solution, right? Because we're not talking about just prescriptions. So aside from the fact that pharmacies are providing other services, right? So the pharmacy is there not only to give you a medication, but there's other services they provide, including the COVID vaccine, right? Again, that was a great natural experiment about the importance of pharmacies. We've been trying to kind of argue it for 10 years, but COVID made it easy for us because it became apparent to the public quite quickly that if you want to partner and deliver essential services to the community, the pharmacy is the place to go.
And Cheyenne, last word goes to you. When you were interviewing people for your article, what were you hearing from folks?
There's a lot of despair, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration, but there's also these ideas that, especially from many of the women that I spoke to and even local pharmacy owners that are saying, it's possible to have these pharmacies in our neighborhoods. We just need the investment for it. We need the commitment from conglomerates, especially to say, we do believe that you deserve to have these services in your in your communities, and we're going to bring that by putting our pharmacy in your community.
Thank you so much, Cheyenne Daniels and Dima Cato. Back with more Chicago Tonight Latino Voices right after this.
The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated housing insecurity, substance abuse, human trafficking, and domestic violence, often leaving women struggling with those issues with virtually no resources to move forward. But the pandemic also sparked an idea for a local woman, Maria Castro. She found a way to get everyday necessities plus a touch of inspiration to women in need. Now she's helping to put love on the shoulders of women all over the world. Producer Erica Gunderson has the story.
I think all of us know that before we walk out the door, we grab our purse, right?
For many women, a purse is more than where they carry their wallet and keys. It's a life kit.
And in that purse, it could be anything from your kids' photos, maybe a trinket that they gave you, a rosary. And so when you have to leave sometimes in the middle of the night because of danger and you just run out, you have nothing, how do you pick up the pieces? How do you get back that purse that meant so much to you?
A little more than a year ago, a chat with a friend sent Maria Castro on an errand that turned into a movement.
A very dear friend of mine, she is the founder of a safe haven in Chicago.
A safe haven is a very holistic, comprehensive model to help address the root causes of poverty and homelessness.
And so during pandemic, she and I were having a conversation about how were things going and what's going on. And she told me that they were having trouble getting toiletries that the women could individually have because they could no longer share. So she was kind of in a quandary and said, let's figure this out.
Castro's solution was simple. To get the items to a safe haven quickly, she just went out and bought the toiletries herself. Sitting in her living room surrounded by shopping bags full of shampoo and toothpaste, she says inspiration struck.
I thought, I can't give a woman a plastic bag filled with these toiletries. Like, how insensitive would that be? So I decided to go onto Amazon. And so I ordered purses. I wrote a note of inspiration, put one in each of the purses, and then it just dawned on me, like, it's filled with so much love from me to whomever is going to receive this. It's a love purse.
I immediately embraced it and loved it. To the women that are here at a safe haven that are here for so many different reasons. Again, some because of job loss, some due to domestic violence, some coming out of prison. Even some women that are military veterans, are here, and the smiles on their faces, when they got a purse filled with all these amazing essentials, I think is truly lives up to its name. I mean, it's love, right?
That's when Castro realized donating purses filled with not just necessities, but also a bit of encouragement, is a mission that anyone wanting to help women in need could carry out.
I put it out on social media, and that was it. Like, the floodgates opened. I was getting calls from people saying, oh my God, this is great. It really became something that anybody could do so easily, and it wasn't that costly.
Soon, the idea took off across the country and even the globe. Volunteers Castro calls Love Purses angel ambassadors hold purse stuffing parties and deliver them to social service agencies in their areas.
I had people from Canada, Ontario, that said, can we do this here? Can we duplicate it? Of course. Mexico, Puerto Rico, and we sent some to the Ukraine recently.
Locally, Love Purse partners with agencies like Metropolitan Family Services and Magdalene House Chicago, a residential recovery program for survivors of human trafficking. Executive Director Ida Butler says for women rebuilding their lives after trauma, the purses carry special meaning.
We provide the home for them. We provide the services they need to function. And this may be something that they have not had for years, perhaps, or if ever. Something that's personal, something that's theirs, something that's unique and special to them.
1 year and 6,000 donated purses later, Castro says the flood of help and encouragement Love Purse continues to receive fills her with the desire to keep this mission going.
I want to be able to help as many women as we can. Obviously, the need is there, but at the same time, there's never a lack of donations or people that want to help. It just proves to me that there's so much kindness and so much good out there.
For Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, this is Erica Gunderson.
You can find more information on Love Purse on our website. And that's our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News. And while you're there, you can view our summer festival guide. And if you're watching us on Saturday night, know that you can also catch Latino Voices and Black Voices on Sundays beginning at 10 p.m. And don't forget, you can catch my reporting on 91.5 FM WBEZ. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Michael Puente. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Stay healthy, stay safe. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm whose attorneys embrace a culture of philanthropy and service by volunteering their time, expertise, and guidance to help others in the greater Chicago community.